Eric the Turf Teacher Jones. Oh, yeah! Teaching you life lessons, business strategies, and leadership.
Let's grow together.
Hey everyone, Turf Teacher here. Welcome to the course entitled Plant Damage Control, course number 2666. This course will get you 1 credit for landscape contractor credit via online, our website, turfteacher.com, by watching the video, taking the quiz, and downloading your proof of attendance. So this course was recorded as a webinar a couple of years ago. So you might hear some people during the webinar commenting or asking questions, which is always a good thing. It's always good to hear other people's input. So just wanted to let you know that this was recorded previously as a webinar, and we edited it to make the online course for licensing period up to July 31st, 2025. So once you watch the lecture, go ahead and take the 10-question quiz. If you pass with a 70 or above, you'll be able to download your proof of attendance. Now, this course is only good for 1 landscape contractor credit for licensing period July 31st, 2025. So anyway, thanks, guys, and I'll see you in the next lecture. We'll go ahead and get started with plant damage control. A lot of the damage that we see with plant materials, it is caused by us, and it's caused by Mother Nature. Look at the plant material that's struggling out there with this heat. Look at the turf grass that's struggling with this heat. It's something that we're not going to be able to do much control when Mother Nature is involved, but the things that we cause or do unintentionally can be preventable. And so we are going to talk a little bit about that and some measures that we can take to keep everything definitely safe. So, all right. So, control of our disease. When the plant is symptomatic, meaning that it is showing signs or symptoms of being sick, the pathogen is already safe inside doing the damage. It's already a done deal. A lot of the times we're not going to be able to save it, or if we're trying to save other plant materials, we may have to remove that infected plant. But these control methods are most effective if they occur prior to not the disease, but the actual fungus or whatever it is that's going to cause that disease actually gets inside the plant. So, we may want to take measures such as, pruning out the plant, letting airflow get to it so that there's no moisture down in it. Not using hedge clippers, which creates that, 1 inch to 2 inch thick of greenery to form all over it, and then down inside the plant where no light or air can penetrate, creates the perfect opportunity for disease to set in. So measures like pruning, limbing up the trees around it, making sure that we're doing good irrigation practices, which can be a situation where we're good landscapers, but are we good irrigators, and vice versa? Or is our homeowners that we're working for coming home and playing with the remote control and, turning the water on at night? The plant leaves and the turf grass is getting wet this time of night. The grass is dying. Homeowners are putting extra nitrogen thinking that's going to help it, and then they're turning the water up. They're creating the problem there with brown patch. So all of these measures and methods that we take, we have to be on site. We have to take notes of what's going on, and we have to be in full control of the property and not let even the irrigation contractor, I'm an irrigation contractor, but when I've put in a landscape and there's another irrigation contractor that's, put in the system, I want to have control of that system
so that I can control how much water is getting to my plant materials and to my turf grass. And that's not knocking the irrigation contractor. They may be a great contractor, but do they know their plant materials? Do they know the water requirements for each and every plant? Did the landscape architect know the water requirements? Because that kind of bothers me in a sense. You know, coming from a landscape architecture background, my undergraduate's in landscape architecture. The landscape architects are putting on the plan landscape contractor or irrigation contractor to design irrigation systems. They're not even touching the irrigation system. They're letting us design it and price it and give a quote on it when there is a big landscape job. So you would think they would want to have control of that irrigation design versus, you know, turning it over to the installer. With effective disease control, we want to minimize and control the introduction of the pathogen. This is inoculation. This is the disease coming in to the picture. So with that disease triangle, which we'll see a picture here in a few minutes, you know, you've got to have the pathogen itself, which is going to cause the disease. You got to have a susceptible host, which means that the plant material or the turf grass is not strong enough. If it's a susceptible host, that means that it's in a weakened state. And if we're properly maintaining our turf grass, if we're properly maintaining our shrubbery and our trees, you know, we're going to have good, healthy plants. The pathogen can be there, but it's not going to affect a good, healthy plant. It's going to affect the weak ones. And then you got to have time, and then you've got to have environmental conditions, which will help aid in the development of the disease. And so we'll see a good picture of that disease triangle here in a little bit. But inoculation is basically the introduction of that pathogen and that disease to actually take hold. Some of our methods of control, we'll talk about each one of these separately and in depth. We have avoidance, we have exclusion, eradication, and eradication's, you know, tough to eradicate every possibility. You're not going to do that. You can protect your plants. You can have resistance using host-resistant plant material. There are, like, just think back to the red tip photinias, which was one of my favorite plants as a young guy starting out in the business. I really love those plants, and they were eradicated. I mean, the plants just disappeared because of a disease. The disease happened because people were not sterilizing their pruners, their hedge clippers when going from job to job. Now, occasionally we may be on a job site and we might see a 40-foot, you know, red tip photinia, and I'm like, holy cow. And it was because it was never pruned, you know, so the disease never, or the pathogen never got into the plant because it was never pruned with the pathogen on those pruners. And then therapy is basically actually, you know, using a fungicide or an insecticide that is carrying to get rid of the insect that's carrying the pathogen. So that's when we're basically using like a chemical. So with avoidance, you can avoid the pathogen by planting where the pathogen is not, or choose a site that is not environmentally favorable. Now, this first one right here really gets to me. You can't plant plants that are not in our plant zone or in our heat zone. You can't do that. But the problem is we have clients that visit family and friends and kids across the country, and they see these plant materials. And so they think they can purchase one, especially if they're driving. You know, a lot of grandparents drive back and forth to see grandkids. They purchase one of these plants and they bring it to North Carolina and they plant it. And it's, you know, a plant that should be grown in southern Georgia or Florida. It's just not going to grow. And then they get mad at us. They're like, what's happened to my plant? Well, for one, it doesn't belong here. Or ordering stuff online. You also see landscape architects, since this has now become a national license, you know, once you get CLARB certified, you're pretty much certified in the country, and then you just purchase the state license that you need to perform the work. So if you got a landscape architect that's working on several, gas stations and architects, yep, if they're working on a fast food chain or a gas station and they're doing all these site plans for all over the country, they're only used to the plant material that they're accustomed to in their area. And so they're putting these plants on there. With the planting site, it has to be prepared. And a lot of these specifications that we're seeing now on installs is, soil remediation. They're getting rid of the bad stuff and they're bringing in engineered soil. Or they're, making us do, the tree police in Charlotte. They're creating a good planting site for this plant, for these trees to be planted in, which is going to cause less stress on the tree, which is not going to make them a susceptible host. Planting time. I sold a big job yesterday planting trees for Harris Teeter. We're cutting down a bunch of trees. They're like, go ahead and cut the trees down, but we want to wait to October to plant. It's just the wrong time. And we don't need to be planting trees in parking lots right now with this heat going on. Even though there's irrigation there, it's not a good irrigation system. They just want to wait. I can't blame them. And then purchasing disease-free plant stock. You have to go and inspect the plants before you have them delivered. I know some good architects and landscape architects that want to go to the nurseries and actually pick out the plants themselves. I welcome that. That's, hey, you pick the plant out. It's you're part of the responsibility now, but make sure that they are disease-free. And then what cultural practices did the nursery take when growing the trees and the shrubs? And then what cultural practices are we going to take, especially if we're going to maintain the property? If I do a new install, you should want to have that maintenance contract for at least that first year to make sure that these maintenance and cultural practices are implemented, and you're on site, at least once a week with the with the new landscape, and you've got an eye on it. The next method of control is exclusion, and this is to prevent the inoculum from entering your planting area. You don't want it there at all. Again, goes back to inspecting the nursery stock. Is the plants healthy before they get shipped to the job site? Then you need to inspect them, especially if they've been put on a tractor and trailer and been inside for several hours or even a day or two. You would want to reinspect the stock. Reject it if it is susceptible of having a disease, or if there's insects that you're seeing on it. You can reject the shipment. Or if it's not too bad, you can go ahead and treat right there, probably, before you even stick them in the ground. With plant quarantines, I've only seen this happen a few times, but it's the legal restriction on the movement of plants. They're not allowing plants to be brought into North Carolina because of certain insects that may be on the plant, or certain diseases that are going to spread like wildfire. The North Carolina Department of Agriculture can put restrictions on bringing in these plants to North Carolina. And then if we know that the insect is the main culprit of this disease, we can go ahead and treat for the insects and get rid of them. Eradication, very unlikely. This is the reduction on the inoculums. You want to destroy the diseased plants. You want to destroy any alternate host that may be susceptible to this disease. If one type of shrub has got it, that's in, a certain species, if you got another species next to it, you may want to go ahead and get to it. You can rotate crops. Now, this can help. Probably the only time we're going to see this situation, maybe with annuals that we'll be doing in our color beds, but more or less in type agricultural or even nursery settings. And then always treat the soil. There's, plastic culture, they're doing that in nurseries. I've seen it done. We do it here on the strawberry farm where we put down the plastic rows and we're treating the soil way before we plant the strawberries. So it's a good way to do it. Not likely going to happen in the landscape, but I have seen it where they do put down the plastic and then they fumigate underneath that plastic to get rid of soil fungus, preventative on weed control. It works, but that's going to be your higher dollar landscapes. Protection, create this barrier between the pathogen and the plant. You can use fungicides, bactericides as protection. Again, these cultural practices. And what I mean by that, again, is if you've got shrubs that are underneath a tree canopy and then the tree limbs are start to hang down and those tree limbs get wet with irrigation or rainfall, and then they're sitting on top of that plant, those plants are really never getting sunlight. They're not getting air movement through there. So this water and this moisture is going to make a susceptible host of that plant. And all we've got to do is simply limb up those trees, thin them out so that sunlight and some airflow can get down to those plant materials, and we should be fine. Cultural practices goes hand in hand with the environment. What kind of environment are these plants planted in? If there's no wind, if there's no air movement, if there's no chance for it to dry out, is it too wet? And also the environment, a lot of shade. You may have a client that's like, hey, Eric, why is this shrub not doing good? Look at the one up the street at my friend Margaret's house. And you're like, well, I mean, Miss Smith, yours is planted in full shade. Theirs is planted in full sun. There goes a situation where environment takes place. The client wanted to plant the plant right there and didn't take into those considerations. Again, get rid of that bad insect that is carrying this this pathogen around with them and actually landing on the plant and introducing it. They're inoculating that plant. With resistance, use the resistant crops. And I know we just talked about the red tip photinia. There is a new one that has been introduced, and I saw it this year and I saw it last year at the Green and Grow Show in Greensboro. And it was good because when I walked up to the booth, I'm like, that's a red tip photinia. And they're like, yes. And it is resistant to the disease that the older ones had. So, our botanist and horticulturalist, they are working good on these breeding of these plants and actually introducing ways that they are less susceptible and less likely to get that disease. It doesn't mean that that it still couldn't happen. It doesn't grant immunity because it still can happen. And then not only choosing the resistant crops, but we need to select plants that are just good for this area and for the microclimate that's on your property. Again, if you have a shady situation, meaning there's just no sunlight's going to get there, we need to use shade-loving plants. We're not going to be able to plant the sun-loving plants, and we're going to have to explain that to our clients. Or you're going to have the chance to remove some trees if they're wanting those type of plants there. And so, like I said, resistance does not mean that the plant will not become diseased. Therapy, pruning out the dead or diseased parts of the plant, using the chemicals, and then even using heat treatment. I've never been lucky enough to actually see heat treatment. So if anybody has had any experience with that, please let us know. Just hadn't had the opportunity. And, that's a good thing that we haven't had to go to that extreme. But of course, we've all used the chemicals and we've all gone in and pruned diseased dead parts of our plant material. And this is what the method of control is called, therapy. And with our control programs, we got a plan. We got to think about what's going on. We know from a turf grass standpoint that we're pretty much going to have to deal with some type of brown patch or whatever in the summertime, especially on our irrigated yards. It's just going to happen. And especially new installs with new irrigation systems, and you got Pops coming home and he's sitting on the back deck and he's put in, spent 20,000, 14,000, 15,000 on an irrigation system. He's wanting to see that water run. So he's got the remote control or the app on his phone, turning this water on and off, and it's 7 o'clock at night, and he's out there for a couple hours, and next thing you know, it's dark, and the turf grass and the plant materials are wet. You've just made a nitrogen application because it is irrigated, low nitrogen, but you're still putting some feed out in the summertime. We're creating that. It's going to happen just about every season. Or is this disease sporadic? Does it only happen once in a while? But we have to know what's going on. And once we know what diseases we're going to see, we need to understand the life cycle of the disease. Same thing with our insects. We've got to understand, which stage of life are these insects most controllable with the use of a pesticide or some other means to get rid of them. Our proper methods can control some disease, and others just must be tolerated. With your methods of control, experience will help you to know which method to use at the proper time. That's just the way it is. There's not one person in this world that knows everything about horticulture. This industry is so wide open, and there's so many career paths to take, and we help each other out. And somebody that's been in tree and shrub care for 30 years, they're going to know this stuff more so than somebody that's strictly just doing lawn care or somebody that's doing installs. It's just the experience that we build up over time is going to help us with our methods of control. And so here's this disease triangle. The goal is to break some aspect of it. When all these three come together with time, we're going to have the disease. And this is what we call the disease triangle. Again, the susceptible host, the conducive environment, and then there has to be the pathogen. And so sometimes we may only have one or two of these parts of the triangle. But when we have all three and they merge together, and over a period of time, the disease is going to develop. And so as landscape contractors and as pesticide applicators, our main goal should be making sure that we have good, healthy plant material by correctly feeding it, correctly giving the amount of water that is needed for that species, making sure that it's pruned properly, making sure that it's mulched properly. And then all of that is also kind of helping with the environment. It's if the plant's healthy and we're taking care of the other trees and limbing it up and letting the light and the air flow with corrective pruning, we're creating a healthy environment instead of that conducive environment. So back to control: cultural, physical, regulatory, biological, chemical, integrated disease management. It kind of goes hand in hand with integrated pest management. Disease is a pest, but clients love it when we start talking about integrated any type of management because they don't want to see the pesticides being put out on their property. Now, also, I was lucky enough to sit in a class at the Green and Grow Show from NC State that they were talking about organic lawn care. And so many of our clients are interested in that, and because they don't even want Roundup sprayed on their property. But it's just impossible. We don't have the manpower to actually get out there and pull weeds. But if you could start implementing stuff like IPM or integrated disease management within this class, clients will listen and they will actually pay for some of these services. But when it comes to that organic lawn care, it is possible to have 100% organic lawn care program. But what they were telling us at the trade show was that if you have a client side by side with the client that's using, the regular program that's using man-made products, your client using the man-made products are going to be happier and they're going to spend less money. Organic lawn care can be done. It's just going to cost a fortune, and the client's not going to be as happy with the results of how their turf grass and even their shrubs are going to look with that. It's just going to take some products, inorganic products to make it look good. And then again, buying the resistant stock, and then using the mechanical controls of removing the pest by hand, pruning back the shrubs, limbing up the trees, all again helping with that environment. So cultural control, crop rotation. If we're on a farm, we would rotate vegetable crops each year. You would never plant the same. You'd want to draw up your garden plan and the different raised beds or the different sections that you have. You would want to plant different stuff each year. Summer ploughing or plowing, however you say that, exposes this pathogen to the hot sun, which we've had plenty of hot sun the past few days. It's going to kill those pathogens. With plant selections, make sure that you're only choosing, plants that are healthy, that are disease resistant, and plants that are for our geographic location. Time your sowing. Again, this is basically if you're planting in a greenhouse or in your garden, time your sowing to avoid soil-borne pathogens, and do not sow the seeds too deep because it will get infection, causing a pre-emergent dampening off. Destroy affected plant debris. Now, if you're pruning this stuff out, don't leave those clippings, in the mulch bed or anything. I see so many people or so many landscapers, when they show up to a job to prune, first thing they want to do is rake back the pine needles in the mulch, and then they get those hedge clippers, and then they're letting all that debris fall at the base of the tree. Well, when that stuff starts to decay, that's just a place for disease to set in. That's a place for insects to live. You want to rake all that stuff out. I can see pulling back the mulch so you can rake up the clippings when they fall, but so many times they just leave the clippings and then put the pine straw or the mulch back on top of it. Mix the cropping, year to year, with irrigation, water early in the day. I always tell our clients you need to have the irrigation come on before everybody takes a shower. You don't want to have to sit around. You don't want to jump in the shower when your irrigation system is going, especially if you got, low water pressure. But that needs to be done before people get up. That allows that turf grass to dry off throughout the day. And avoid wetting the leaves on your plants. That's why I'm a big, proponent of using drip irrigation in the shrub beds. And once these shrubs get established, they don't need water every single day. They don't need water probably, in the spring and in the fall. They may only need it, in dry situations like we're having right now and with the heat. You can turn those zones off when we're getting sufficient rainfall. But again, maintain the plants to a healthy status, proper sanitation of our equipment when pruning, and then soil preparation. You've got to prepare the soil. You can't just plant in this good old red clay. You've got to add the amendments, and you got to follow the specifications if you're doing a commercial install. Staking, keep the fruit off the ground, and that is so true. Like if you've got a fruit tree, and even with our strawberries, when we get a little rain and that fruit is laying on the ground, it's going to rot on the bottom of it. You got that rot spot, you've got a chance for disease to set in, and you've got bad fruit that customers or yourself do not want to eat. Avoid any type of injuries. Wounds will allow the pathogen or the pest, the insect, to actually enter the plant. So how many times have we seen weed eater damage at the base of a tree because there's no mulch ring? You've got to protect your plants. You don't want the weed eater string hitting it. You don't want a limb to break without, giving it a good clean cut, maybe having to paint over it or whatever. You want to make sure that there's no way wounds can get into these injuries. Mulching will reduce splashing, which will transmit disease from plant to plant. Your irrigation, you got the sprinkler heads hitting these plant materials. If one plant is infected with the disease, that water can hit it with such force that it the pathogen jumps to the next plant within those water spots. Mulching also helps keep moisture level constant. You don't want it going up or down. That plant to remain healthy in a good healthy situation where it's not going to be a susceptible host. The moisture levels have got to remain the same. And then weed control. Weeds harbor pests. And mulching is going to keep the weed control down. And there's going to be times that we're probably going to have to use some Roundup. It's just what it is. But these weeds will rob the soil of nutrients and water. And it's funny, checking on our properties, so far this week, yesterday and today, it's dry as a bone, but the weeds are still growing like ever. It's funny, week to week, how many new weeds have emerged in this dry climate that we're having. With plant selections, grow plants appropriate for your geographical area. Purchase them. We're landscape contractors. We need to buy local, and we need to only use plants that are in our plant zone. Plant in the environment preferred by the plant. Proper light, proper nutrition, and proper moisture. Now, one of the biggest mistakes we see is plants that like wet feet planted with plants that like dry feet. And so we don't need to mix that. That goes way back to the design stage. Why are we putting, plants that belong in a xeriscape garden with, plants that need a lot of moisture? Light. Again, the plants that some plants need so many hours of daylight or darkness to actually reset their buds, their blooms. Mums, for instance, we're getting ready to plant mums here shortly in the fall. And a lot of times underneath landscape lighting or underneath street lights, people will plant a mum bed and they bloom and they're one and done. They're not going to have color, but just for a few days because of the street lights. Mums require a minimum of 8 hours of darkness so that they can continue blooming. Nutrition. Some plants like acidic, others may like a little bit of alkaline soil. So we've got to make sure that we are planting or grouping plants that require the same type of soil, and also with the nutrition, because we're probably going to be slinging the fertilizer instead of actually hitting it spot for spot. Matt, I'm reading your text. Sorry, I just saw it. St. James Plantation had one course that was full organics. Was wild how much it took labor wise without the chemicals. So it did. It took a whole lot more labor. It was more labor intensive without using the chemicals. So good input there. Thanks, Matt. And if people want to pay, we can make it happen. That's what I tell them. I'm just not going to pull weeds. All right, destroy the affected plant material or the debris. Prune, rake, and mow. Prune the infested twigs in late spring or early summer. Late summer pruning requires a larger portion to be pruned. Again, rake up all the fallen limbs and debris that come from pruning, and never cut more than a third of growth when mowing. We've skipped properties. We're like on week 3 now. We still show up, maybe blow off, do a little edging, a little touch-up work so we get the site visit. But it's hard to put a mower on grass that's just dried up completely. So, the guys will go through the yard and kind of knock down some of the weeds that are popping up or spray for them, manually with a backpack. But it's just horrible. I don't think I've ever skipped 3 weeks, in my career. Soil prep. Check to see that the pH is correct for the plant that you're growing. Use organic matter, compost to build soil. Create a healthy soil environment with beneficial microorganisms that will help keep pests on check. And then the healthier soil makes healthier plants that are less susceptible to the pest. And it all starts with our soil. And, here lately in the past few years, I'd say we're seeing soil specifications on commercial sites dominating the landscape. it's costing more to do the soil remediation than it is to plant the landscape or do the irrigation. But this is what the landscape architects and these are what the municipalities are actually wanting. Does it necessarily have to be done? Maybe, maybe not. Some of these jobs only require crepe myrtles and Nellie Stevens and dwarf Burford hollies. And you could plant literally those things in concrete and they would still grow, but they're still wanting that soil remediation done. Physical methods of controlling soil-borne disease. Again, the dry heat treatment, hot water treatment, and firing. Again, I have not had any experience with these. So if anybody has had it, please speak up and tell us about it. A lot of this stuff, it's going to cost money. When it comes to soil remediation, soil treatment, it is going to cost money. And sometimes it will probably just be better to haul it away and bring in more than to actually do some of these treatments. Regulatory plant quarantines or restrictions on moving plants between countries or state to state. There are domestic and international quarantines. And I think I've even seen it, briefly where, even county to county, they were stopping the movement of plants. Biological control. This is the intentional use of natural predators, parasites, and disease organisms to manage the pest. BT, this is a bacteria disease of caterpillars. Milky spore. This is a disease of the Japanese beetle grub. And then the fungi, trichoderma, is used to control the rhizotonia and other diseases. So we are, smart enough. Again, our botanists and and our chemists are coming up with these ways that we can actually use living organisms, which is these diseases, to manage insects. Also, there's grass seed that you can get that is already encased with a disease to help with some of the turf grass insects out there. Insecticides, fungicides, all fungicides do not kill fungus. They can reduce the fungal spores, temporarily putting a halt on it. We can use protectants or therapeutants. The protectants are used to protect the plant from attack. This is applied before an infection, and then the therapeutants eradicates the pathogen after infection. With your protectants, though, if you're putting this on plants that are getting ready to grow, you've got a situation where you got a fast growing plant and you put a protectant fungicide on it. If the plant grows, the new growth is not going to have that protectant on it. Or if you put it on there and we get a rainfall or irrigation hits it, you're not going to have protection on it. It's washed it off. So it's got to at least dry on there before any type of water hits it. With chemical, classification is based on mode of action. Systemic enters the plant system. These are your therapeutics. Your non-systemic, generally your protectants that act only on the surface of the plant. Classification based on general use. We've got seed protectant, like we were talking about for, turf grass, to help with some of those turf grass insects in the soil. Foliage fungicide, soil fungicide, and then a fruit protectant. These are the fungicides that we're going to be using in the landscape. Classification based on chemical nature. We got our sulfurs, our coppers, mercurial, diclone, captane, folpate, Vitavax, Plantavax, Benomil, all these good stuff that we are using, pretty much not on a daily basis, but they are at our disposal and in our arsenal that we can actually use when we need to. Water dispersible wettable powders, most commonly available that we would use. The good thing about these wettable powders is when we put them, spray on the plants, when it dries, you're actually going to see that chemical on the leaves. We can use dust and then we can use suspensions and actual slurry mix. With integrated disease management, using multiple approaches, including record keeping to minimize the risk of your plants, environment, yourself, while reducing cost. Take pictures of what you're doing. Guys, I use Snapchat all the time, not to snap people, but I use it because you can type over your pictures. I can take a picture and then I can select the pen and I can draw on it. I can actually type on it and say, hey, today is June 9th or July 9th, and, document it and save it to my phone. I've got all the record keeping I need right there on my phone. Then I can email myself that picture or upload it to Jobber or whichever software program that you're using. So you keep good track of what's going on with your properties. With resistant stock, our plant selection, choose your plants carefully. Again, can't stress this enough. Plant selections that are less susceptible. The ways in which plants demonstrate resistance is their tolerance, the non-preference, and then antibiosis. Tolerance is survival even with heavy infestation. The plant's just tough. It's going to be able to tolerate it. It's going to live. Non-preference, these are plants that are less attractive to insects that may be carrying that pathogen. So those are good to have. They're just not, they're not, they're probably your the ones you're not even going to pay attention to though when they bloom, because every plant has to bloom. That's how they reproduce. They're just inconspicuous. You don't see them. So they're just less attractive to the insects. And then antibiosis, these are the plants that have an adverse effect on insects. So the insects are going to stay away because they know if they were to feed on it or whatever, that they stand a chance of getting sick themselves. With mechanical control, hand picking. Pick and destroy the bugs and eggs. Just, pick them off, throw them on the ground, select them or throw them away. Barriers, aluminum foil, reflective mulch will repel aphids. Crushed eggshells and hydrated lime will deter the slugs. Rick said, I'm experiencing a perfect storm on the golf course. This high heat and humidity, I'm seeing snow mold like growth on my fairways and approaches. Half-inch Bermudas to black algae on my bent grass greens. Around 100. Yes. And so, Rick, what are you guys doing to combat that?
Let me unmute. Actually, Eric, we're trying to figure out what to do.
Gotcha.
Sadly, our budget doesn't allow us a whole lot of chemical use, and between that and the equipment breakdowns, it's like I said, it's a perfect storm. It's coming, and we're trying to stop it, but right now it's gotten ahead of us.
Gotcha.
We used to top dress the algae with sand. We would go out there and like chicken hand spread it and throw it on
Yep.
that. And then we also sprayed Dawn dishwashing soap to help dry that area too, kind of like not like a reverse wetting agent. I've done that before. I'm trying to think. I'm a little rusty on my golf course stuff, but give me a couple minutes. There was a couple other little tricks of trades we used to do. When I went to Eagle Point, they had a lot of algae issues over there too. So I've just got to remember. But they were A1, A4 pin cross.
Oh, yeah.
So I mean, is that what you guys are now, or are you like the older pin cross?
Well, we've got, I believe, it's champion on one side and regular bent on the other. The champion, I think has been that fine turf has been refined so much, it's gotten weaker as they've refined it. It just doesn't seem to hold up. And we're lightly doing probably 1/8 light verticut, and then we'll do a real light dusting of topsoil or top dress mix and drag it in. But that black algae comes to the exact same spot every year.
Yeah.
It's almost like there's something underground that we're not getting, even though these are pushed up greens.
They are push
There's
up. Yeah.
Yeah, there's something in that one area that's just not letting us get any root growth whatsoever.
Yeah, it's almost like what Eric said. I bet there's something sitting in the soil, and it could be just
There
like
is.
when somebody just, you get to a landscaping contractor that comes in and just scrapes the ground and lays sod down, right?
Yeah, yeah. And
Where
the
y'all
other thing
where y'all
with the
at, Rick?
molds I'm seeing, you're going to track it right in from the approach, right into the green, almost like the blights or the pythiums or whatever, it's going to come right in on the equipment. And we're always mowing in the morning when it's most prominent. You can see it on the taller fairway grass.
Can you
It's
spray? Can you do you got enough? Do you have enough budget to spray? I want to say Daconil takes care of algae too.
Daconil is the go-to.
Yeah,
We've tried that, the 28, 27, 87. We've tried all those.
yeah.
The problem is the guys have used it so frequently over the years, just like Eric was saying with the crop rotations. You've got to do the same thing with your chemical applications, and they just don't do that. They use the same thing every year, every time.
Well, I'm gonna tell you, my turf grass teacher, he used to tell me, and I'll never forget it. He said, "Spray it white, sleep at night." Daconil's a life-saving
Yeah.
chemical, and
Oh
I know
yeah.
when they regulated us on how many you could spray, how many pounds per acre, or vice versa. It was like we
Yep.
were like, "Nah, we
Yeah.
got to figure something out."
Yeah. I hate that they've gotten rid of so many of the good stuff, but there again, I understand that at the same time. But you really got to be careful with what you use and when you use it. I've always been a big proponent. You got to change things up. You can still get the same application for the same type of chemical, but you need to vary it up a little bit.
Yeah, we just
Sorry,
had.
Eric. Eric, I didn't mean
Oh,
to
dude,
to get off
dude,
track there.
no, this is what it's about, man. We help each other out, and so no, I love hearing this.
Now, one more
What
thing,
y'all
right quick, if
doing?
you don't mind me, Eric, can I ask just one
Yeah,
more
man.
thing?
Yeah.
Matt, you're saying you used Dawn, is that correct?
Yeah, Dawn dishwashing soap.
Okay. The liquid soap, how do you put it out?
I sprayed it. We sprayed it in like a backpack, and we spot
Okay.
sprayed it. We spot sprayed
Okay.
it. I can't remember. I mean, it ain't much, like maybe 2, 3 tablespoons in a backpack.
Okay.
But I remember them, saying that the ingredients in it, would help dry, almost like it just dries it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it didn't hurt. Uh, it didn't hurt the turf at all.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Now I've used kitty litter before in wet areas.
Yep.
Aerify, then you put a nice application of kitty litter down, then cover it with top dress mix, and you go on about your business. But I've never used the Dawn before.
Yeah, I
Interesting.
remember doing. I remember we did that at McGregor Downs and Cary.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm done,
Well,
Eric. I'm sorry.
oh no, but no, that's awesome. What are y'all doing to keep the bent grass cool?
We will syringe in the afternoons early. We've got one guy that basically that's all he does. And oddly enough, our bent grass, even this time of year, is the best I've ever seen.
Okay, good.
It's carried us for the last 3 or 4 years. When our Bermuda greens have taken a dump on us, the bent grass, even this time of year, is just really outstanding.
Okay, cool.
We still have bent grass in Fuquay, and we had I can't remember the name of the chemical, but it's Daconil with it's either a wetting agent or something, an
Hmm.
additional to it.
Yeah.
And we had a perfect storm. Greens were rolling about 13, height of cut was super low, firm, dried out. All this heat came and we had some overspray and we roasted some
Oh
stuff.
yeah.
It's actually
Yeah.
so bad. Jim Kearns is also a member at the club. He actually came out. We took samples. They're trying to recreate it at the turf grass fields. Can't figure out why it's doing what it's doing.
Hmm.
It's like the crown. The crown is alive. The roots are white. The leaf tissue is gone. Like it's just sitting right there, and it won't push out.
Mm. Hmm.
Where are you at, Rick?
I'm in Pinehurst.
Okay, okay.
Not at Pinehurst Country Club per se, but I'm in
Yeah,
Pinehurst.
gotcha. All right. Well, cool deal, guys. No, man, I appreciate the input from both of you guys. So this is awesome. Like I said, you guys learn from each other way more than you could ever learn from me. So I appreciate it. You guys are out there in it every single day on the golf courses. Exclusion, we can use nets, tubes, bags. They'll keep the pest away from the plant. You'll see that people put the nets over it. Water can be used to dislodge the pest and kill the fragile pest. Just the pressure of it will knock it off and actually kill it. Natural control, the nature of the pest, predator, and parasites. Mother Nature will take care of the situation at hand. She is the best pest control that we do have. With some pesticide notes, synthetic versus non-synthetic. Both synthetic and non-synthetic can be very dangerous. Synthetic, made by man, does not occur naturally. Non-synthetic is natural, occurs naturally. However, it can be reproduced in the labs. Organic versus inorganic. Organic is anything that is carbon-based, so at one time it was living. Inorganic is made of no living material, your sulfurs and arsenics. And then our botanical pesticides listed here that we've all used, every single one of these. And biological control that are not botanical. BT, NL, disease organism of control for grasshoppers. Which, poor little grasshoppers get a bad rap, but they're really not that bad, to be honest with you. Birds will eat our grubs and insects, and then we can use the soaps that'll help with aphids, leafhoppers, mealybugs, whiteflies. And our last slide here, biological versus synthetic. Biological pesticides are not necessarily more safe than synthetics. Some botanical pesticides are toxic to fish and other cold-blooded creatures. Natural pesticide effect is usually less than synthetic in how long they last, so application is more frequent. There are many naturally occurring things that are lethal to all living organisms, including man. Just because it's natural doesn't make it safe, as we can see with nicotine and caffeine. So,
Eric the Turf Teacher Jones. Teaching you life lessons, business strategies, and leadership.
Let's grow together.